You've done this before, or at least your body has. Not you specifically, not in this lifetime, but the biological event you call childbirth has been happening to human bodies for roughly 300,000 years. And for all but the last tiny fraction of that time, it happened without an epidural, without a sterile room, without a team of trained professionals standing by with instruments and monitors and the ability to perform emergency surgery in under 4 minutes if something went wrong. It happened in the dark, in a forest, in a cave, on the ground, and somehow we survived it. The modern story of human childbirth is a story of rescue. We talk about obstetrics the way we talk about being pulled from a burning building, as if the hospital is the only reason any of us are here. And there's truth in that. Maternal mortality rates plummeted in the 20th century as medical intervention became widespread. The numbers are not in dispute. But the story we tell ourselves about what happened before the hospital, the story in which our ancestors simply died in enormous numbers every time a baby needed to come out, that story is incomplete. And the parts it leaves out reveal something important about what the human body actually knows and what human communities have always been capable of. Start with the biology, because the biology is where this gets genuinely strange. Human childbirth is by any measure the most dangerous birth process of any mammal on the planet. The reason is not a mystery. Our brains got bigger, faster than our pelvises could adapt. The skull of a human newborn is almost exactly the size of the opening it needs to pass through, and in many cases it is not smaller. It is the same size. Sometimes it is larger. The baby has to rotate, tuck its chin, turn its head, navigate a passage that was not designed with it in mind. A horse foal is born and walking within an hour. A human infant cannot hold its own head up for months. We arrive, by the standards of the animal kingdom, catastrophically unfinished. Evolutionary biologists call this the obstetric dilemma. The pelvis wide enough to deliver a big-brained baby is in tension with the pelvis narrow enough for efficient bipedal walking. Evolution made a compromise, and the compromise is the most dangerous moment in human life, the moment of birth itself. This was not a modern problem. This was the problem that every human community that has ever existed had to find a way to manage. And they did. The oldest evidence for organized support during childbirth does not come from written records. Writing is too recent. It comes from something older and more fundamental, the social structure of the groups that early humans lived in. Unlike virtually every other primate, human females do not give birth alone. Chimpanzees retreat from the group when labor begins. They find a secluded spot and they manage alone. Human females do the opposite. They seek company. They move toward other people. Anthropologists who have studied this pattern across hundreds of traditional cultures have found something close to a universal. In every human society ever documented, childbirth is attended. Someone is always there, usually multiple people. This is not a cultural preference. Researchers believe it is a biological adaptation, as old as the problem it evolved to solve. The rotation the baby must make during human delivery means that the mother cannot guide the infant out herself the way other primates do. She cannot reach down and assist without risking injury to the child. She needs hands that are not hers. The presence of others during human birth is not a luxury that civilization added. It may be what made the whole thing survivable in the first place. The people who attended births in the ancient world were not random bystanders. They were specialists. Every human community that has ever been studied, from the most isolated hunter-gatherer groups to the earliest agricultural settlements, has had some version of the same figure, a woman with knowledge, a woman who had seen births go wrong and knew what to do when they did, a woman whose entire body of expertise was organized around the specific problem of getting a human baby safely out of a human body. We call her the midwife. But that word is so domesticated now that it barely registers what it actually represents. In a world without hospitals, the midwife was the difference between life and death. Not sometimes, routinely. The knowledge these women carried was not written down for most of human history. It was transmitted person to person, body to body, through apprenticeship and practice and the slow accumulation of what worked. But the sophistication of that knowledge, reconstructed now through ethnography and comparative anthropology and the study of traditional birth practices that have survived into the modern era is not what most people expect. Ancient birth attendants understood positioning. They knew that laboring upright, walking, squatting, on hands and knees, used gravity as an ally in a way that lying flat on a table does not. The lithotomy position, flat on the back with legs raised, which became standard in Western obstetrics, was actually an adoption from 17th century European physicians who found it more convenient for the person delivering the baby, not the person delivering it. Many traditional birth practices preserve postures that modern obstetrics is now rediscovering. Squatting increases the pelvic opening by up to 30%. Ancient birth attendants did not know the measurement. They knew the outcome. They understood the use of plants. The ethnobotanical record of substances used to manage labor across traditional cultures contains compounds that modern pharmacology has since confirmed have genuine physiological effects. Blue cohosh, used by indigenous North American peoples to stimulate uterine contractions. Ergot preparations, used across multiple cultures to manage postpartum hemorrhage, the same basic pharmacological action as the synthetic oxytocics used in modern delivery rooms today. Women in labor have been given pain-modulating plant preparations, have had their abdomens massaged with oils, have had warm compresses applied to the perineum to reduce tearing. These were not guesses. These were techniques, refined across generations of observation in the highest stakes environment imaginable. They understood time. Perhaps most importantly, they understood when something was wrong. An experienced birth attendant in a traditional community had likely witnessed dozens or hundreds of deliveries before she attended yours. She knew the difference between labor progressing slowly and labor failing to progress. She knew the signs of a baby in the wrong position. She knew when the bleeding after birth was within the range of normal and when it was not. That knowledge, without monitors, without measurements, purely from pattern recognition, built through years of practice, was real clinical knowledge. It saved lives. What surrounded all of this, what held the whole system together, was the community itself. Ancient birth was not a private medical event. It was a communal one. The women of the group were present. They talked, they sang, they brought food and water. They told the laboring woman stories of other women who had gone through this and come out the other side. They made noise to mask the sounds that predators might have used to locate a vulnerable group. They created, without any framework that would recognize itself as medical, precisely the conditions that modern research has now confirmed improve birth outcomes. Pain perception changes under social support. Labor progresses differently in the presence of a calm, experienced companion than it does in isolation or in the presence of anxious strangers. A 2017 Cochrane review of continuous support during labor, one of the most comprehensive analyses ever done on the subject, found that women with continuous support were more likely to have spontaneous vaginal births, less likely to need pain medication, and had shorter labors. The companion effect is real. It is measurable. It is not new. It is 300,000 years old. The babies who made it through ancient birth, who survived the gauntlet of the most dangerous moment in the human life cycle, were greeted by a community that had been collectively invested in their arrival. Not a nurse who handed them to a parent and left the room. The entire group. The people who would help raise this child. The people whose survival was bound up with this child's survival. We did not survive the obstetric dilemma through luck. We survived it through each other. Through the accumulated knowledge of women who made it their life's work to understand what the human body does in its most extreme hour. Through communities that understood, without ever articulating it as a principle, that a birth was not one woman's problem. It was everyone's. The hospital is 200 years old. The midwife is 300,000. And when you understand that, the miracle is not that we have hospitals now. The miracle is that we were here long enough to build them.